Thank you very much. I said I'm Hugh Knowles, and as a way of introduction, my co-founder likes to introduce me or mock me for being a poster child of everything that's wrong with the 21st century, with my solar panels on my roof, my climate change angst, an Internet of Things startup, and a really knobby job title. It's a lovely working relationship that we have. I think I probably don't need to sort of go over the first slide. We've already talked about that, but I'm guessing we're all here for the same reason, because we're excited about connecting stuff. But I guess the point I want to make right at the beginning is that's not the goal, right? That's not the goal, the connecting stuff. That's not what we're really, really excited about, is it? Because, you know, if you follow the headlines, you might not get that impression. I don't know if anyone was watching the kind of coverage of Davos in 2014, but I think the word was kind of giddy. People were giddy about the Internet of Things. There was so much chat about X billion connected devices equals Y billion dollars. And what was slightly embarrassing was that in a lot of the coverage that was, you know, from there's a journalistic coverage and in the papers, and even I think in the FT, where I read one article, they would sort of talk about that, promptly followed by a conversation, slightly awkward conversation about a connected fridge. And that's been an idea that's been around for like 20 years. How are journalists still talking about an idea which, is anyone working on connected fridges? Which was a really bad idea then. It was like an idea in search of a problem, and it still hasn't found that problem. And you can't help that, you know, all these figures, all this stuff was sort of, something was missing from the giddiness, well, certainly for me. If we're on the verge of this sort of massive technological revolution, the point is not the technological revolution. The point is, what the hell is it going to do for us? Like, how is it going to help us with all the sort of craziness that happens in the 21st century? So that's my particular perspective, and just a couple of goals or challenges that I feel particularly strongly about. Clean air in cities, a huge growing problem, air quality and our exposure to air quality. I'll come back to that. I mentioned climate change angst. I've actually stopped reading climate change science because it was actually making me a bit sick. But you know, there are huge opportunities here to help people navigate that risk, understand that risk, and help them avoid it. And I could go on. I mean, part of my other job is I work for an NGO, and you know, I spend rather too much time kind of listing and helping people understand these problems. And of course, I'm aware that you don't just, you know, technology just doesn't evolve just by looking at problems and needs. You know, we have two basic pathways. We make something new, we go and play with it, unexpected stuff happens. And you know, the classic example of that is mobile phones. No one really expected SMS to take off as part of mobile phones. And certainly no one expected a, you know, mobile currency to come out of SMS. So, you know, you can't just say we just have to focus on needs. There's always a role for the unexpected in seeing what happens. But I think we also need to really actively look and make a conscious decision about where this technology could take us and where it could solve problems that it, you know, haven't been solved so far. And my concern about the Internet of Things at the moment, I'm aware this is not entirely true and I'm making a sweeping generalization, is that there's an awful lot of focus on the features. There's an awful lot of focus on the connections and the things and the billions of the dollars, and not a lot of connection, you know, not a lot of talk about, you know, what we're going to do. And we still seem to, you know, that connected fridge just keeps on coming back, and you kind of feel like that there's got to be a reason for that. Why is that still being used as an example? So this is what we are really interested in at IOTA. So we're looking at the kind of nexus of where we find people who have a problem, have a particular need, and where there are sort of bigger concerns that they need to address, and how we think technology like this can help solve those problems. And obviously we're completely aware that there are a lot of problems that it can't solve, but we think there are a lot of places where, for example, the right information at the right time in the right place can help people create change. And we sort of want a kind of another narrative apart from the kind of, hey, the Internet of Things is going to happen to you thanks to a large consortia of very big companies, and the kind of very amazing kind of grassroots stuff that's happening. We wanted to kind of come at a slightly different angle, which was, let's go and find some really interesting problems and see where we think the Internet of Things is going to make a difference. So we started experimenting with this. Our first project, little pilot, was we kind of gave out, we just wanted to see what happens if you go to people with a problem and give them the sensors that would tell them something more about that problem. So we gave noise sensors to campaigners under Heathrow, and they've been campaigning for ages, but they've never really had any evidence about how it affects their sleep. And originally, we wanted to connect it up with kind of like something like a Fitbit to monitor their sleep patterns. But in the end, we had to go for something a bit simpler due to budget. And they would just press a button when they were really affected by noise, and the sensor would register what the noise level was. And they sort of slowly built up this evidence thing, and they found it incredibly powerful to have that kind of additional evidence, which they could then go to someone and say, look, this is the actual data. This is how it affects my life. And that was just a little experiment to see whether it would, what would happen. And now we're trying to build a kind of ecosystem of projects around clear problems that we think can be helped by approach. And we want communities and organizations and people to come to us, and we sort of help them develop a hypothesis for change and connect them with the people who can do the hardware and the software and understand, rather than just producing information, how does that information solve the problem? So is information a useful thing to help you solve the problem? Our main project at the moment is air quality, as I previously mentioned. If anyone's good at names, we obviously need help. So as I mentioned, it's a massive, growing problem in cities around the world. I don't know how much people know about how air quality is monitored within cities, but if you're lucky enough to live in London, we actually have a really sophisticated air quality monitoring system called the London Air Quality Network. But it is very, very expensive. And the equipment is static. This is on the Marylebone Road, not a particularly nice place to spend a long period of time if you don't like your particulates. But the government is looking to save money. The government is looking to close air quality, big, expensive air quality stations. So while we have a growing problem and a growing problem in cities around the world, and hardly any other cities have this kind of level of air quality monitoring, we're also facing financial pressure. So we urgently need to know more about this problem. We need to know, help people know how to avoid it. We need to know what happens when we try things to create change, and we need to give people a greater body of evidence so that they can campaign for that change. And this requires a lot of sensors, and sensors that aren't static, sensors that move with people. Currently, air quality, your exposure to air quality is modeled based on interpolation between points in cities. And obviously, that's good, and all those models keep improving. But we need to understand more about how we move through cities and how our exposure to air quality is affected by that. So we are building highly accurate sensors. And this is the important bit, because there are obviously a lot of sensors out there that aren't very accurate. And that's great to kind of experiment with. And if you build up enough of them, you can do some interesting stuff with that. But what we really need is, what am I exposed to at a particular point of time, and how much confidence do I have about that exposure? So we're not building the kind of sensors that you'll buy for like $20. We're going more for like $1,000. And what we're doing at the moment is we're sort of building in 3 levels of interaction. One is an immediate alert, get out of there. The other one, second level, is we've looked at your route, you've walked it a number of times, or you spend a lot of time in these areas. If you change your route or move to a different way by a certain number of yards, it'll reduce your exposure by this percentage. So here's a way to start to kind of navigate the problem. It's not solving the problem, but it begins by helping you navigate the problem. And then the third level is, our hypothesis is we're going to start by saying, you own the data that you generate from your device, and you choose where you want to share it. So you can just keep it for yourself and just work out how to personally do something about it. You can share it with your community or campaign group or anyone else that you think is relevant, or you can choose to share it with for example, a health company, local government, academia, and you get to make that decision. We don't know how that's going to work. We're starting pilots fairly shortly, but we wanted to test how people interacted with that data. As I mentioned, we're starting, hence the slightly clunky name, we're starting with buggies, and there are several good reasons for this. One, infants suffer the worst effects from exposure to air pollution, so there is an urgent need to get more data on that particular topic area. We think it's a really good proving ground for the solution and an interesting area to start, and of course it is slightly provocative, and we have to be very careful about how we generate that data and how people understand that data. So we're starting with kind of people we know and groups who've already kind of expressed a clear interest in this. That's all I want to say. We've got to the point now where we are testing. We're about to roll out pilots in London. So we're one of the winners of the IoT Launchpad from Innovate UK. and we will start our pilots with groups of 10 people putting these devices on buggies. And we don't intend this device to be a wide rollout consumer device at the moment. I mean, obviously the technology might, commoditize and shrink in the next 5 to 10 years. What we're looking to do at the moment is to partner up with health companies and insurance companies and everyone else who's really interested in risk and exposure to risk, and obviously academics and local government. And those partnerships are already kind of in place, and we're starting to develop how people interact with the data and how it look. But we're also looking for other projects that are of a similar basis or a similar ethos or a similar kind of approach. And I know that there are a couple who are talking here, and we're always interested to have conversations with those people, profile those projects, and stick them up on our website. I finished 4 minutes early.
Thank you very much, Hugh.